before we start live streaming, there will not be any fire alarm scheduled today, so if the alarm does go off, we know. I think we've got no members of the public here, but the fire exits are fairly well signed, and the assembly point is in the car park. In addition, could I ask everyone, if you haven't done so already, to switch off or certainly to silent any mobile phones? Okay, this meeting will be recorded and is live streamed, so please, when you use your microphones, if you wish to speak and turn them off when finished. So to start the meeting, item 1 is the minutes of the 12th of December on pages 4 to 12 of your agenda pack. Are you all in favour? I sign those as a correct record. 1, yes.
Chairman, could I abstain because I wasn't here?
Right.
Please. I abstain as well because I also wasn't a member of the
So
committee.
it's myself and Harry, I think, then. Yes? Okay, I'll sign those. I don't believe there are any matters arising directly. Ruth, apologies, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Linda Monument and Councillor David Wickerson, and we have substitutes, Councillor Attewell for David Wickerson, and Councillor Plummer should be here shortly for Councillor Monument.
Good.
He said he'll be late. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank those substitute members for attending, because we do have policy matters to decide today, and welcome to our 2 new members. Urgent business, I believe there is none. Do members have any interests to declare? There are none. Non-members wishing to address the meeting? Alison, always welcome. Training, which is a standing item. Matthew, can you just give us some info on that, please?
I think this was just in view of there are new members on the committee. We thought it might be useful, probably at the June committee, to do some training for members, probably particularly on the annual accounts, given that there should be the June meeting where you would see the draft accounts. So that was a suggestion for members to consider.
We can either take that before the meeting or after the meeting. Is there any preference for an early start, new members especially? County. Right. I suggest we take that after the meeting, on the June meeting. Thank you. So item 8 is 2023-24 external audit, the audit results report. David Riglar to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee. So, item 8. The report starts on page 13 of your pack. So this report's our findings from the audit of your 23-24 financial statements. It's been done in accordance with the audit plan that was presented at the committee back in June, and kind of extends from the progress report that we brought here back in September. I'll largely focus on the exec summary, but more than happy to delve in any detail anywhere else if it's helpful for me to do so. So firstly, remember from previous conversations, we now have statutory backstop dates. The statutory backstop date for this set of accounts is the 28th of February. I'm planning on signing this afternoon, so ahead of that statutory backstop date. The first few pages of the report kind of sets out the national context, and I know we've had those discussions before, so but I think just to recap at a high level, so 22-23, you'll recall, we went straight to disclaim, so you had very minimal procedures on your 22-23 accounts in order to sign off ahead of that first backstop date. In 23-24, you've had a full audit and some additional items. The auditing standards, accounting standards often change, adding what needs to be done to the audit, so that's been done. Publications from the NEO, SIPFA, LGA have all kind of set out the journey to recovery, if you like. And I think it's worth just noting that that is a 4 to 5 year journey. You know, just to manage expectations, the view is it's going to take 4 to 5 years in order to get back to a clean set of accounts. Now, that is clearly not just isolated to Breckland. That impacts just about every other council in the country at the moment. Alongside that, the white paper just before Christmas, and most of the focus was on devolution and local government reorganisation, but within that there was also the local audit strategy. So there's things the government are doing to try and help us get back onto a sustainable footing. So there's things that need to happen. At the moment, we've just got a backstop date, which essentially resets the system that's broken. So it's not kind of corrected the causes of where we got to in the first place. So just turning to the report itself. So on page 20 of the pack, sorry, is it better for me to give your page number? Yeah. So page 20 of the pack, just in terms of changes to the scope, as you'd expect, we just updated the materiality for the draft set of accounts. There was one new account that we did some extra work on, that was asset held for sale. On that page, status of the audit, there's a few items there that were still outstanding. They are all now closed. So we are now just down to the last closing procedures, which I said will happen this afternoon. Also on that page, value for money. So our value for money work, we identified no significant risks and no significant value for money weaknesses from the work we performed. On page 21 of the pack, you'll just see some of the audit differences that we identified during the audit. There's one unadjusted difference referenced in the report. There's been one additional one that was identified during the closing procedures. Immaterial amounts do not impact upon our findings, but we just need representation from management in terms of why they have not been adjusted for. In terms of adjusted differences, there were actually 4 in total in the end. 3 are included in the pack, and then there was kind of a classification adjustment on the balance sheet for an asset that sold in 4.5, but some of the transactions had slipped into 3.4, and then some disclosure changes. Page 21 lists out the other reporting issues that I would have to kind of bring to the committee's attention. There's nothing additional that I've needed to report. Appendix A within the pack. So I think you look at the opinion and it's a disclaimed opinion. Appendix A will probably become the more important lens for committee members to look at as we go forward, because that's where we kind of break down the accounts and show you how we're rebuilding the assurance. So at the time of issuing the report, there's lots of greens, ambers and reds in there, so it doesn't look a massively pretty picture. But actually we've completed a lot of that work now. So actually the only area where we couldn't complete planned procedures during the year, actually 2 areas, one was provisions and one was group reporting. So that's not to say we didn't do stuff, but we just didn't have enough time to complete all of the procedures in those particular areas. Other than that, we completed all planned procedures, which actually is a good step forward in terms of the rebuild process. Last thing I'd like to say, just a big thank you to Alison and Matthew and the team. It's a challenging environment to be in when the audit kind of restarts again, and probably been quite challenging for the finance team in terms of the number of queries, because that bar is continuously increasing, and it will increase again in 4.5 with additional auditing standards that we need to comply with and additional accounting standards. So that was all I was going to say on the report. As I said, I'm more than happy to answer any questions on any elements of the report.
Any questions from members? Harry.
Right, it's come on now. Thank you, Chairman, and welcome you to your first meeting as Chairman of this committee. Just a quick question, David, I hope it's quick. Reading through the report, obviously it's regrettable that there are things outside your control, you know, which happen nationally, but it's where we've got a catch-up period, and there is where we won't be able to catch up. Just going through as a layperson in the audit differences, where you've highlighted things like, I think like page 29, 26 actually, disclosure differences, like valuation of plant, equipment, property, etc. Does that then mean that where you found any differences that management have then said, yes, you've had an explanation of why there's been a difference in the valuation? I have read through all the things again once, but I might have missed something there. Thank you.
Yep, sure. So section 5 of the report is the total picture of all the audit differences. As I said, we only ended up with 2 unadjusted differences, both immaterial in terms of nature. All of the other differences were accepted and corrected by management.
I think you've probably answered my question there, but there was a reference somewhere to it's page 38 where the disclosures don't align with SIPFA guidance on a number of those matters there. Is that an issue, or is that something that the council's working towards? Is it an issue of concern, I guess is what I'm saying.
Any more questions? So can I ask, what is the likely nature of disclaimed audit opinion, and does that take into account the work of internal audit?
So the nature of a disclaimed opinion is essentially saying the assurance we cannot get on the accounts is so pervasive we can't form a true and fair view of the accounts. And in terms of that disclaimer, it's been driven by probably two main aspects. The first one is actually the pervasive aspect, and that's the fact that we don't have assurance over the opening balances. So because we didn't audit 22-23, we don't have assurance on those opening balances. That will form part of a rebuild going forward. But at the moment, we're waiting for guidance from, I think it's going to come from MHCLG, potentially the NEO, in terms of how that should be done across the sector. So there's a consistent approach to rebuild, and I've heard different ideas as to how that may happen. The second aspect kind of concerns the now limited time in which we've got to complete the audit. So, and this is speaking generally as well, because we're seeing this across councils. If we send out requests, we get information back. Sometimes that will tick all our test attributes and we can conclude the tests. Sometimes it can't. Now in the past, we'd have just kept going until we actually got to a position where we conclude. But now we've got a backstop date. We can't keep going, so then we'll stop. So that's the nature of the disclaimer. I think as you go forward, and that's what Appendix A will become important, the kind of modification to the opinion starts to kind of reduce. So assuming the guidance comes out, we can do the rebuild. You know, it will then go down from I think the guidance suggests it might still be a disclaimer next year. The year after that, it might be an except for. So everything's fine apart from this particular area. It starts to water down until you get to a clean opinion.
So just for me to understand that, so the major problem is proving the brought forward balances. So as a different piece of work, can those be established sort of from first principles rather than looking backwards?
So this year, there's certain balances on the balance sheet. So that's our focus, the balance sheet essentially in terms of rebuild. There's certain balances on the balance sheet, the short-term ones in nature, that we can rebuild assurance, and we have done at March 24. So an example being cash. So we can audit your cash position at March 24 and get assurance on that. So we've done that. It's the kind of non-current assets and liabilities where it becomes a bit more problematic. So valuations is a key one. You know, there would have been valuation movements or movements on your non-current assets during 22-23 that we haven't audited. They will impact upon your reserve position. So it's those kind of items that we haven't got that assurance on. As I said, we've got an idea as to how you should rebuild assurance, but we need to see that kind of sector-wide guidance just to make sure there's a consistent approach. I've heard different ideas going forward. I've even heard the idea of deemed balances, which basically means you just take it as correct. I think that's highly dangerous, and I'd be surprised if we go down that route, but I don't know, we're in a kind of difficult situation.
Yeah, I would agree that deemed balances would be a tricky path to go down. On page 11, there's a request to review. Is that for management to consider? I think it's our page 11, not yours. Numbers are gone. No, it'll be your page 11. No. Oh. Yeah.
Yes, so this is standard wording. Essentially, we've reported the findings. I guess this is your opportunity to tell us that there might be something we missed or something we need to consider in addition to everything else that we've reported in here. And we're talking obviously material, significant aspects to the accounts, which
But that effectively is covered by the management letter, is it? Okay, thank you. And you identified a weakness in JV authorization. Have we offered a means by which that weakness is removed?
Shall I go first? And I don't know if Alison or Matthew wants to then kind of come in. Just to set a context with this, so this is all about authorisation of journals, so manual adjustments that are made within your trial balance. Is there somebody looking at those adjustments before they're made? It's not unusual in smaller organisations that not every journal is approved by senior members. So we've raised it as a weakness because obviously we've had to do additional work, so we've reviewed all of those journals just to make sure that there's none that are erroneous in terms of the nature of their processing. So weakness identified, we have mitigated it, but I don't know if Alison wants to kind of, or Matthew wants to talk about Breckland's response.
I think authorisation of journals, I mean, there are systems in place to get journals authorised. And your testing, I don't think you found anything that had gone through that hadn't been appropriately authorised. So I think that's the key point. That I think your testing took a bit longer just because of the way that some of the information came to you in terms of how journals are authorised. But the important thing for members to understand is that the journals were done and they were authorised appropriately.
So the suggestion is there's not necessarily written evidence of that authorisation.
I think it's more. It proved to be more difficult to get it out of the system this year for various reasons. But the testing showed that they had actually been authorised.
Okay, thank you. Right. So in accepting this report, does that conclude? Is that effectively this committee approving the accounts?
In terms of the approval of the accounts, the committee at its last meeting reviewed the updated accounts, and then it did delegate that to you as the chair to then approve with any subsequent amendments. And there've been, as David said in his introduction, there've been a couple of minor amendments, but nothing so significant that we thought it needed to come back to the
Okay,
committee.
so that's effectively a non-agenda item because
Yeah.
it's already been dealt
Yeah.
with, but I still needed to sign it later.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no further questions, I think David has. Sorry, Dave, I think he has other meetings to go to. So whilst he would normally stay for the rest of the meeting, I'm quite happy to let him be a busy man. Thank you. The committee duly note the report. Item 9 is amendments to the Constitution. Sarah Wolstenholme-Smythe will present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report deals with various amendments to the Constitution as are listed in Appendix A and Appendix B. Appendix A concerns amendments regarding the financial aspects of the Constitution, and Appendix B, the planning aspects. The suggested amendments are to reflect new working practices and align financial values within areas of the Constitution, and to align the values for individual transfers between budget heads to other areas of the Constitution, and also to give figures for approving receipt of any grant funding, which again align with other areas of the Constitution. In respect of planning matters, following the implementation of IDOCs and our Capita colleagues moving over to Breckland Council, the Director of Planning sitting next to me, we have reviewed the Constitution, more specifically in respect of planning matters, and the suggested amendments clarify who can do what, and we've moved some delegations from the legal team to the planning team, because that makes a lot more sense. The amendments also update the process in respect of members becoming aware of planning applications following the implementation of the IDOCs system. I will briefly go through the amendments, but I don't propose reading out each and every one. And I'm obviously happy to take questions, and Alison, Section 151 officer here, is here to take further questions in respect to the financial, and Simon, Director of Planning, for planning matters. In terms of the financial amendments, Amendment 1 deals with the inventories, and as we don't have a financial handbook, that has been deleted. In respect of Amendment 2, this deals with, in essence, write-offs, and it's been suggested that the limit is increased to £20,000 per item rather than a global figure of £2,000 per annum. Amendment 3, this has been tweaked to align with other values and provision within the Constitution, in that our Constitution provides that anything up to £68,000 a chief officer can deal with. In excess of £68,000, i.e. £68,001, it moves to Cabinet for authority, and in excess of £100,000, it's Council who has the appropriate authority. So the amendments there are just to align with that overall provision in the Constitution. And the Amendment 4, again, the amendment is suggested to deal with any transfers in respect of £100,000 rather than the key decision, because again that aligns with the Constitution and grant funding. And finally, the amendment in respect of the financial arrangements, we've removed the date, the 8th of February, as there is no statutory provision for the 8th of February, so that has been removed. In respect of planning amendments, the first amendment relates to the IDOCs implementation and how the weekly list and individual member notification will work, and has been working for the last few weeks going forward. And then in respect of powers of the Executive Director, the habitat regulation power was already given to the Executive Director, so that's merely been repeated. I would actually like to confirm that in respect of the Section 330 of the Town and Country Planning Act, I'm actually going to remove that as a recommendation, because that's actually, having looked at it again, is actually already covered in the delegation and is already given as an officer delegation. So I propose removing B, and then obviously C, D, E, F will move up. The tree preservation orders, planning performance agreements, to agree all evidence and conditions on appeal, and to deal with all processes in respect of planning council's enforcement powers were not specifically stated previously in the Constitution, but we consider it's a good idea to actually state, so that everybody knows where the delegations sit. as in also the additional delegations or clarifications for section 106 and the two that have moved from planning relate to, sorry, not from planning, from legal, relate to the item at H and the item at I in respect of certificates of lawfulness and diversion or creation of public rights of way. So in respect of Amendment 2, I'm now proposing that actually that paragraph 1 will not happen. That will remain sitting under the Planning Committee. The only addition under Amendment 2 is that we add the words "and thereafter." So it will be "and." So if there are objections to tree preservation orders, it's "and thereafter." The Planning Committee will be able to refuse or confirm opposed planning preservation orders. And just to clarify, if there have been no objections, then that will remain as delegated to the Director of Planning. I am happy to take any questions.
Roger and Mark have both asked questions. Should we do finance ones first and planning second? Is yours finance or planning?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask a question about, on page 68 of the pack, Amendment 2? I'm concerned that we seem to be going from a figure of £2,000 per annum up to £20,000 per item. So effectively, you could have a situation where we've got 5 items and suddenly we're up to 100 grand. And that seems like an awfully big jump. Why are we trying to increase that by that amount? You may get odd sticks of furniture, and don't think they're going to be worth 20 grand. You may have a vehicle which is in excess of £20,000 that you need to write off. But why don't we separate the two out? It just seems to me that I'd like an explanation as to why we've got such a massive jump there, and what are the checks and balances to make sure that there's democratic oversight of that decision-making process.
Yeah, thank you. It is a big jump from the 2, like you say, to the 20. There's 2 reasons for that. One is, as Sarah said, to align it with other values elsewhere. So disposals of equipment, vehicles and that type of thing is already at 20,000. This is more about write-off when things have come to the end of their life. The main area that gets picked up through this is wheelie bins, because they have come to the end of their useful life. And so what we're finding is that we hit £2,000 per annum within the first few weeks of a financial year. So in practical terms, we are having to get approval from the Cabinet member pretty much all the way through the year because of the number of bins that are now coming to the end of their life. So that £20,000 per item will mean that the bin disposals, when the wheels fall off and can't be replaced anymore, will not get picked up through this, but the larger items will.
For further clarification, is that a net residual value write-off, or is that the acquisition value write-off?
Yes, so we take this to be the value of the item when it was bought or something. So that's why bins would be picked up. So if you're writing off a vehicle, you would always pick that up through 20,000, whereas a bin doesn't cost as much as 20,000 to purchase. So it is the initial cost rather than the disposal value.
Right. You've raised the point. Anyone else want to discuss that? Right. So Roger's still not happy, I think.
No, I understand the premise. That just seems to me like an awfully big jump when I thought you were going to hit me with something bigger than a wheelie bin, to be honest, Alison. That's really thrown me, to be honest. I thought you were going to say the bin lorry or something like that, or that we're going to dispose with a write-off value of 20,000. But yeah, I'm always concerned with these things to make sure that there's at least some democratically elected person, a cabinet member, who when you get to a total that says, yeah, I'm happy for you to carry on and sign that off, because I don't think that's a very cumbersome process to do that, really. And that's a massive jump from £2,000 to £20,000 for individual items, because essentially I don't think you'll ever have to go to a cabinet member pretty much to ask for any permission to write these things off, and that concerns me. So I'm not convinced yet that you've swayed me in that.
Right, so when there is a cabinet member approved write-off, does that get recorded as a democratic decision of that member, that cabinet member?
Yeah, so thank you. So any decision by a cabinet member will come through the blue form portfolio holder process and get published as a decision in the same way that an officer decision will be published. So there are other areas of the Constitution for items for disposal, for example, which are already at the 20,000. So this is about aligning it as well. I think it's more about practicalities. It may not be a cumbersome process, but the frequency that it's happening is, you know, every few weeks. Every 2 to 3 weeks we're disposing of a bunch of bins because we don't have anywhere to hold them. So when they come to the end of their life, they get held in a part of the depot. They're taking up space, and then they go and sell them for recycling when the space gets filled. So it's really more about the practicalities of it than the fact that it's a process. It just is happening all the time.
Yeah.
Could you then tell me what is the monetary value per annum that you're having to write off for wheelie bins in total at the moment?
I would have to send that to you. I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. This is the first batch that are coming to the end of their life, so they've had a significantly long life when you think when wheelie bins were sort of first put in place. So there's 60-odd thousand households, so it's quite a significant number of bins, and they do go for recycling and we sell them, so we do get some money back, but I'd have to get back to you with that value. I don't know it, I'm afraid, off the top of my head.
So the focus is on the value of the write-off, not on the value of the asset. Would it be more sensible to focus on the value of the asset and thereby avoid the wheelie bin problem entirely?
I think this is what this is trying to do. It is the value of the asset. An individual bin is not very high value. Even when you get a group of bins, they're not a very high value, but they very quickly get to £2,000. So yeah, the 20,000 is about the value of the item. So it would definitely pick up a lorry. It would pick up a vehicle potentially. Not that we don't really own many vehicles. So it would pick up all of those larger items, but allow us to deal with the smaller ones through the officer decision.
Okay, Harry.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there's a question probably for Sarah Simon on this. In terms of the Constitution, this is not about money, but notifications.
I think we were just covering the financial amendments. Does this relate to financial or planning? More than happy to take your question, but
Right, so just to go backwards, are there any further questions on the financial, changes to the financial aspect of the Constitution? No? Okay, then we'll take Harry's question. We're moving on to planning matters.
Apologies, Chairman. Apologies, Sarah. Right, thank you. Going to item B, obviously to declare a sort of interest as a member of the Planning Committee, under F3 delegation to directors, it says there the above power, that's the power delegation. It refers to the individual notification. I'll just read this out: being sent to all members for each containing planning application received within their ward. How that then relates to the right for a ward member under B in relation to their own or adjoining ward, because if you're only getting notification about your own ward, would you then also receive a notification of an adjoining ward where there might be an interest or an overlap? Just how those two statements reconcile. So I'm being particularly obtuse there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There is still the ability for any member to search on the weekly list on IDOCS to see what is happening elsewhere. Parish councils are also consulted about applications within their parish or town as well, so that they can speak to ward members. I don't know what the implications are in terms of IDOCS. There's a lot we don't know about IDOCS, but I don't know what the implications are in terms of IDOCS, of enabling it to identify adjoining members and do that. So this really is sort of the belt and braces that we're trying to do here.
Simon, you referred to a weekly list on IDOCS, but that's not something that's distributed to members. Is that something that would be easily distributed so we are kept as informed as we used to be?
No, there isn't an ability to provide a weekly list in the same way as we did previously, because previously, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but previously we were able to produce a PDF basically and circulate that to members on a weekly basis. We don't have that facility within IDOCS. There's the facility within IDOCS when you register, go into the public portal, you can look at applications received or decided on a weekly basis.
I think it would be helpful, not this is directly part of this constitutional matter, but it would be helpful to inform members of precisely how to do that.
We have sent instructions out previously. I think we sent some in December, and then I think we may have resent them just within the last few weeks. We are also looking at other guides where other authorities have taken up the IDOCS cloud system to learn from them as to what can and can't be done and how to advise members. We're also in the process of putting together a short sort of video to explain how that is done, because I appreciate the system is very new.
Okay, Mark?
Thank you, Chairman. Simon, maybe to answer this, with your permission, Chairman. I'm looking, Simon, at bullet point 2 under the First Amendment. I'm not sure that we require that, because actually it refers again to the chairman or the vice chairman directing things to go to planning committee, when actually everything currently goes through the chairman's panel. So I'm not sure that that particular bullet point is actually required. So you'd have a little bit of amendment to the top bit, but the other bit I have not a problem with. But also on page 71, the bottom of page 71, the bottom subparagraph 2, there's again reference to the chairman of the planning committee or the vice chairman choose to refer to the planning committee any planning application which she considers to be particularly sensitive. I think probably those still go to the chairman's panel when officers or even members, when officers want sensitive equipment. I've been present when those sorts of applications have come to the chairman's panel because it's deemed sensitive by officers and not by members. Oh, sorry.
No, I take the point that there have been occasions, and there are applications where the executive director and officers have decided that an application is so significant, either through its local interest or its scale or its policy implications, that the decision has been made to take that straight to planning committee and not through the chairman's panel process. Equally, there are times when officers take a view that chairman's panel would be the right forum to discuss that and make that decision. So that is something that we do. I wouldn't say we do it on a regular basis, but if you look through committee agendas, you will see that on occasion that route has been taken straight to planning committee.
Does that then apply only to the paragraph on page 71, or does it also apply to the bullet point on page 70?
Bullet point. Sorry.
The second bullet point. Because that bullet point refers to paragraph B.
So you're referring to the one that says the request don't have effective from the opinion of the executive director and the chairman. That one. Yeah. That is essentially looking at the reasons set out in the call-in form for it to go to the chairman's panel. So I may be misunderstanding the point.
What I think it refers to is that if you have a call-in, then it has to. There are two criteria for the call-in. One is the first bullet point, with 23 days of receiving the. The second one is it has to go to the request only have effect if, in opinion of the executive director and the chairman of the planning committee, blah blah blah, it contains proper planning reasons for consideration by the planning committee, which kind of takes it away from the chairman's panel, if I understand it correctly.
I do understand the point. I think we may need to go and have a look and see how that's drafted. My understanding of that, my reading of that, is that you have the call-in form, you then have the reasons why it's considered that the application should be determined by planning committee, and it's for the chairman's panel to have regard to that, to see if they agree with those reasons, and then take it forward to planning committee, or for the executive director or whoever to decide, yeah, to agree that. So I think that's more looking at the content and the arguments made in the call-in form, rather than bypassing chairman's panel and going to planning committee. Going straight to planning committee.
I would value a comment on that outside the committee.
Well, we are required to make a recommendation to council here, but can we effectively approve this but ask you to reconsider the precise wording for a future meeting? Members happy with that? No? Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 points I want to raise on the planning item, and I'll start off following on from what Mark has said. And I do understand where you're coming from with regard to these 2 items where it says consulting. I mean, I'll go to page 71, and we go to item 2, subsection 2. The bit that concerns me is, notwithstanding the delegations and above, the executive director may, following the consultation with the chairman of the planning committee or the vice chairman, choose to refer to the planning committee any applications which he or she considers to be of particular sensitivity. Can you tell me what happens when the chairman or the vice chairman disagrees with you? That's my first point. Could I have a response to that, and then I'll follow up, please?
I think the answer is in the wording there, that it's consultation with the chairman of the planning committee, so there would need to be a decision made by the executive director following that consultation. The executive director may agree or disagree following that consultation. The whole point of this delegation and the chairman's panel, which came about after the peer review, and I think it was 2018, the peer review just before I started, was to take that pressure, for want of a better word, and that decision making from the chairman of planning committee, but still to keep them within have some input into what went forward. So I think the word consultation is the key one there, Councillor.
So just to clarify, and is it clear in these proposed amendments that the ultimate decision maker in here is the Executive Director of Planning? Because that's my concern, that there may be interference from the chairman or the vice chairman in that decision-making process. The chairman's panel was set up, as you quite rightly say, specifically to avoid any of that and take any of that away. Because previously that used to be at the agreement of the chairman, how these things were dealt with at committee. So I just want to be absolutely clear. I don't see why it should mention in here consultation with the chairman. Because if you, as the executive director, deem that to be so sensitive that needs to be heard in a full planning committee, for me, that's it, full stop, end of. And I'm just concerned that there's a slight muddying of the water there, that there'll be a conversation had here and you may feel under pressure from the chairman. I'm not saying you would, but you may feel under pressure from the chairman. I want to make sure where the power is in the decision making here. And also on the chairman's panel, coming back to item B, the second bullet point, I personally think all that just needs to come out. Ultimately, planning officers, you're the professionals, you're the ones that decide whether the calling is done for planning reasons. With all due respect to the chairman and the vice chairman, they've got a lot of planning experience, but ultimately, planning policy and planning legislation. I don't see why that bit should be in there at all. The other thing that I want to just raise, if I may, is Section A regarding this blessed IDOC system. So an individual notification. Could I just ask, with the old system that we had, which was beautiful and worked and really user-friendly, the weekly reports that went out to councillors, is that something that you clicked the button on that software and it automatically generated? Or is it something that an officer had to sit down and put that information together to send to councillors? Because what I really liked and I valued with that system was I was getting all the information about my ward, applications that had come in. I was getting information on all of the applications that had come into the council that may be of interest to me. And I was also getting all the information about any appeals. Because from being a planning committee member, I really value the fact that I could sit there and look at those appeal decisions, because that helps me with my decision, my thought process in decision making at planning committees. Was that something you clicked the button and it generated it, or was that something that an officer did? And if so, why doesn't that happen now? So if that was generated manually by officers, why isn't that happening now? And I'm also concerned by your comment over, and you said, quote, there's a lot we don't understand about the IDOC system. I've really, and that for me is the crux of the problem. Why don't we know about this IDOC system before it's gone live? And Chairman, I think my suggestion would be on these planning items that probably those items, we could agree the financial aspects of these changes to Constitution today, and happy to make that recommendation. But I'm wondering whether we should perhaps just ask the officers to go away and just review these planning changes again. I don't think there needs to be an absolute rush today to do that.
No, I was coming to the same thought process, actually, that we should defer the planning changes. It would be best discussed by certainly the planning committee, because the members with the practical experience of what does come through and we happen to have quite a large number here today, which is probably why we're having a good discussion. So can we have a response from Sarah? Can we just deal with the financial issues?
Yes, Chair, certainly we can, and we can amend the recommendation just to deal with the Appendix A and delete reference to Appendix B. I would like to add that a lot of, we haven't actually amended a lot in terms of the chairman's planning, and a lot of the comments that you've made, we haven't tweaked today, but more than happy to go back and rewrite the whole section if we need to.
Good. Yep.
I think that would be incredibly helpful for me if I could just hear the answer from Simon.
Yep.
To what I asked about the old system and generating reports. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to follow on though from what Sarah said in response to the bits that we're not changing, the rationale behind wording those as we've worded them was to almost still have that political democratic input into that call-in process and into the director making that decision. Ultimately, it is the executive director's decision, but there's still that democratic input into that. And that's my understanding, having been sort of part of drafting that, is the rationale behind it. So that's why, and we're not proposing to change that. And I think if we are looking to change that, then I think that would have to be a discussion with the chairman of planning committee to understand their views, his views on that. In terms of IDOCs, I don't row back on saying that there are things that we don't know about IDOCs. IDOCs is functioning properly in terms of being able to take applications from submission through to decision, through the appeals process, through enforcement processes, etc. There are still some issues around the reporting mechanisms and in terms of how it looks, particularly in relation to historic applications on the website. And we've discussed this previously. In terms of the weekly list under a seller, we have the ability ourselves to write reports which would enable us to pull information out of a seller and set it out in a way that we wanted to, which would then be able to be used to create that weekly list. So officers wrote a report which identified the fields and how they wanted the weekly list to be set out, pressed the button, and that weekly list was produced on a weekly basis. We don't have that function within IDOCs. We don't have the ability to do that. I'm quite happy to take that away and see again whether we can do that. But I think the key is that that weekly list is available on the website and on the IDOCs planning portal. And I think the issue is making sure that members understand the process in being able to do that and see that. And that's what we're trying to work towards. But again, I will go back and speak and see what other authorities do. But I'm confident that IDOCs just doesn't give us the facility to do that.
So, Roger, do you want?
Yeah, and I really appreciate your candor. It strikes me that probably before we make the amendments to the Constitution, all members need to have the training in the IDOCs to make sure that we're happy for this amendment to be made to the Constitution. Because ultimately, if we're not, it might be that members say, well, no, damn it, we do want the report produced, even if that's produced monthly rather than weekly.
So as regards this agenda item, can you propose an amendment that Appendix B items be removed from the recommendation?
I'll propose that.
Do I have a seconder? Yes. David.
Just make the quick point that I understand there is imminent legislation due from government with a view to standardising schemes of delegation. So it may be that deferring this item is not a bad.
I filled a questionnaire out on this very subject this morning, but I'm not sure that the message will get to the right places in government. So I have a proposal and a second that we delete Appendix B from this recommendation. All in favour? That's unanimous. Therefore, the recommendation as amended is to is that the amendments detailed in Appendix A be approved and the Constitution be amended accordingly. That is actually a recommendation to Council, not an approval.
Yes, Chair, I was just to clarify that. Yes, it is a recommendation.
Which I think
to
last
council.
one we had of these we had to change as well.
It does actually say at the top, recommendation to full council, just to clarify.
Okay. It's just that it doesn't appear under the options box.
Oh, right, yes, yeah, but in the actual recommendation, the box on the front page.
Right, sorry,
Just
yeah,
clarify
so
that.
there's, that's just a matter. So those in favour of the appendix, and you said you wanted to remove?
We don't need to worry about my amendment because that was in Appendix B.
Okay, so those in favour of Appendix A items being recommended to Council, all in favour?
Sorry, can I just clarify? I think you need a proposer and a seconder. And then
Oh, right, sorry.
Sorry.
Can I have a proposer and a seconder at Appendix A? Right. We'll have Mark as the proposer and Roger as the seconder. Right, now those in favour. I will get used to this job soon. That's unanimous. Thank you. Right. Back to the agenda. So that's... Right, we go on to item 10, the Strategic Risk Report. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Okay, so I'm delighted to bring to the committee the Q4 Risk Report to provide an overview of the Council's risk landscape. This register was last seen by the committee in December, and as you will see, several risks have changed since then. I will cover the first two major changes which are around, now this is a subject a lot of you know about, nutrient neutrality and waste strategy. Members will be fully aware through both this committee and others that nutrient neutrality has posed a significant challenge to the organisation in the last few years. They will also be aware that in recent risk reports we have spoken about the desire to change the risk level, but the need for us to be cautious in doing so. I am delighted to say that we are now confident in the work around this risk that we can lower this risk level. It should not be understated what an achievement this is and has only occurred through the hard work of many both inside and outside of Breckland. While this still remains a strategic risk to the organisation, work is underway to look at both further mitigations and scenarios in which this is no longer a strategic level threat to the organisation. Next, I want to cover off the changes to the waste strategy. This has been previously one of the higher risks to the organisation, and while much work is still needed in order to deliver this strategy, we have taken the decision to lower the risk. This has been done as a result of greater financial information around burdens funding now being available to the Council. Whilst this still remains a high risk to the organisation, this is a pleasing change to the risk level. Finally, members will notice the addition of a devolution and local government reorganisation risk. There has obviously been much discussion on this already, both inside this chamber and wider. Previously, this risk has been part of the wider emerging policy risk, but we are now taking the decision to create a specific strategic risk. For this, I am going to hand over to Ryan, who will set out the decisions behind why we have created a new specific risk around this in line with the risk policy. Thank you. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate we've got quite a stacked agenda today, so I won't take too much time going over the devolution risk and some other bits. As Councillor Webb covered off, previously devolution risk sat within our emerging policy risk for the last few years. As a result of us being on the DPP programme, we've effectively decided that it now needs to be a standalone strategic risk for the organisation. You'll appreciate, obviously, the time this risk was assessed, that some further information has come out. There's been further discussions about that. So there is further work to do on this risk. I'm hoping that when we bring the Q1 report to this committee, you'll be able to see some of that work. This is aligned with what the other district councils are doing currently with their risk in terms of scoring and in terms of information out there. Obviously, an important bit around this is that we do have a aligned risk in terms of what we perceive the impact and the likelihood of this risk to be. I suppose the other element is I will always try and answer as many questions around this as I can. There may be things which I don't know with regards to devolution, which I have to come back to the committee on. With those, what we would normally do is I'd normally go and email the member of the committee outside of the committee with the answer. Because obviously there's going to be interest in this, I will make sure that all members get a copy of that answer moving forward, and also so it's minuted in the public domain, I'll raise what that question was in the introduction of my following report. The only other minor bit I just wanted to discuss is around targets. Obviously you'll see within the report a lot of the targets have target dates of the 1st of April 2025. The majority of the risks are going to be risks which will always meet the criteria for being a strategic risk to the organisation. So a lot of those target dates will be extended for the upcoming year. Some of those we're hopeful we could lower or remove from the strategic risk register. So for example, nutrient neutrality would be something which I would hope we either mitigate further or we take down to an operational level over the next 12 months. But the majority of the risks within the register at the moment, we would be looking for a year-long extension of that target date. Obviously, I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Harry. Thank you very much, Ryan. You'll be pleased to hear us. I won't be asking any questions on devolution or LGR, having read all the stuff. Looking through the first part of the Q1 strategic risk register, there's nothing new in there in terms of the housing aspects. Although this is a strategic risk report and it's not looking at the financial aspects, and I appreciate when this is written, I'm thinking, looking at our 151 officer, we've had some around homelessness, etc. I know there have been some central government funds going out to local authorities, and how far that might mitigate or appear in the narrative at some point, like, it may help in terms of mitigating, say, the properties that we're buying, etc., just to reflect that and bring it up to date, maybe at a future occasion. Thank you.
I'll pick up the beginning of this, and then if Alison wants to add anything, we will ensure that the stuff like that's brought in the Q1 report, because I appreciate where you're coming from.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, just to add that anything on the finances would also be picked up in the quarterly finance report as well on the temporary accommodation, so it will definitely be picked up somewhere for you.
Mark.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at the risk relating to nutrient neutrality and note it's been downgraded somewhat. I'm sceptical, to say the least, that actually it should be downgraded just yet, because although there is a lot of mitigation work going on, and the Norfolk Nutrient Mitigation Fund, on which I sit, has doled out something like £18 million worth of loans to people to put nutrient neutrality mitigation measures in place. A lot of those just starting to come online and issue credits, especially the ones that involve replacing septic tanks with packaged treatment plants. However, there are other schemes in place which are going to take 2 or 3 years to start mitigating any nutrient or into the River Wensum. So I would query whether this should not be where it was before you downgraded it, in terms of 15 or 16, rather than where it is at the moment. I think it should be a red risk. It is definitely a strategic risk, because our housing numbers are the number of houses we can build, and our housing numbers reported to government are lower than they should be, and that has strategic consequences for this authority. However, I'd like some justification for that risk being where it is.
And if I can just comment that, I mean, obviously the risk isn't as bad as it was 2 years ago when nobody had a clue what we were going to do about anything. So there has been a degree of mitigation, but how effective that is, it's correct to keep it as a high-level strategic risk. But perhaps Ryan would like to comment further.
I appreciate where you're coming from, and part of it was when we had this at a higher level, that's because there wasn't any decisions or delivery moving forward in terms of affected sites. Having spoken to the planning team, because we're starting to now see that, we've taken the decision to lower it, but it certainly, I don't want to underplay the fact that it's not a risk. You know, it's still a strategic risk. This may change based on, you know, if we see bumps in the road, so to speak. So at the moment, we've lowered it based on where it was historically, where there wasn't anything happening. Like I said, I think that's sort of the decision as to why we've lowered it at this point. In terms of the way forward, it's going to be a case of we can look at mitigations to lower it at a strategic level further with regards to sort of how some of this mitigation is covered. I think there's discussions around whether that can be covered by tax or stuff like that. That would be one where we'd look at whether it is a strategic issue or an operational day-to-day issue for the team. I think the route we will probably look at long-term is it will probably always be an operational risk to the organisation. At the moment, though, I totally agree, it's still a strategic one. It's just a slightly lower strategic one on the basis that some stuff is now moving forwards.
Thank you.
If I come back, Chairman, I'd really like some figures on what we're building now within the Wensum catchment to give me some surety that actually we are building houses in that area, because I live right on the cusp of it and there's not much going on in my area.
Perhaps can we ask for that level of detail to be with the next quarterly risk report, please? Yeah.
So I'm happy to include it in the next quarterly risk report. I'm also happy to get those figures for you ahead of the meeting, Councillor, and send those out.
Roger.
Yeah, just a quick one from me. At the full council meeting last week, the deputy leader said that there was a full comprehensive review taking place of the housing department. Is that on your radar? Because that may affect your reporting criteria for Q1.
So that at the moment would sit within an operational HR risk, which is around staffing within the organisation. It's not something at this moment in time I would see as a strategic risk to the organisation, because it's covered under that operational element. Obviously, that's something we will, continue to review, and if we make the decision that it has become a strategic risk, we'd include that within the report. So at the moment, it's being managed at an operational level, but that's something we would continue to review.
David.
Thank you. Just a comment really on the ICT, breach of ICT security risk there. Just a comment, really good to see the percentage of staff who've taken part in the training has increased enormously since it was a bit of a concern last time. But equally, the decision's been made to raise that risk level now. I'm just wondering whether we've got matters in hand to mitigate that risk, or is this a national concern, or is it something specific to Breckland that we need to be concerned about?
I think the note said it was a sort of a higher level national concern that was driving that.
Yeah, there's a combination of, there's obviously the national picture and there's also some regional stuff. So we're part of various regional groups around cybersecurity, and as part of the discussions within that, we've decided that although there is no specific threat to Breckland, there is a regional threat to organisations like us, and that sort of fed into why we've raised the risk. Obviously, it's pleasing that we've increased the cybersecurity number and keeping that high and making sure that everyone has a good standard of training with regard to cybersecurity is important. But the driver for the risk going up at the moment is around those regional, national factors.
Alison.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's really, really good that the officers have done as much training as what they possibly can. However, what I would like to bring up is the fact that we're working hard to get members trained as well. It's been more challenging, I will tell you, but we're getting there with the members training, because obviously members and officers, we're all a risk to Breckland cybersecurity, so we need to make sure it's all up. So thank you for raising that question.
On the question of the member engagement, I did do the questionnaire, but was unable to complete it due to the software. So I notified that I'd done it, but please record that the software wasn't very good.
No, it
No.
wasn't. No, it wasn't. No, full start. No, no, right. The software is consisting of seven, I think it's 7 packages. And what you have to do at the end of each one, there's a short test. And if you don't get all the answers right to the test, that will ask you to do it again. And you'll be in a never-ending loop until you know what the answers are to those questions. Now, did you get a response, Robert,
No.
from your... No.
No,
So
don't
I would
normally.
leave that with me, please. I will make sure you get a
Right.
response and make sure that you're trained all the way through 7 packages.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Roger.
Just to say, Alison, if I'm in a never-ending doom loop on a piece of software like that, the chances are that the iPad will go out the window on the end of my foot after a while. So you might want to take that into consideration. Just on the cyber security, specifically, I'd like somebody to look at the risk with the iDoc system because it's now an iCloud-based system. And also the fact, because that was in the news this week, because Apple have removed the higher level security across the country for iCloud. So we would be at very grave risk if somebody was to get into that system and mess around with it, because we know the problems we've had with land searches and that because of the introduction of the software, etc. I think that's a specific risk that the IT people, you might want to just ask them. As a member, that concerns me that we've got this on a cloud-based system.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was brought up earlier today. Exactly the same thing. So thank you for raising it again.
So, okay, I've got a couple of points of detail here. Under the local plan delivery risk, housing numbers and location aren't specifically identified, but will form a major problem, I suspect.
Yeah, so in terms of that, I believe there is a cabinet report in the next few weeks around local plan. What my expectation is with regards to that is once that report is gone, we'll look at this risk again and bring out some of that more information in it. I think we might have said something similar previously, but once it's gone through cabinet, we will look at refreshing this risk in line with what is obviously discussed in a previous committee.
Secondly, under contract management, there's a suggested difficulty of aligning the contracts with the council's priorities. So my question is, how are the priorities communicated to contract holders?
Is that in terms of, because this deals with the strategic contracts which relate to the corporate plan?
Well, I'm picking up on a comment within the contract management risk. I think.
I'd have to go away and just get a response on that,
yeah, that's fine.
Chairman.
The leaders are quite keen to make the point that devolution and LGR are 2 separate strands of reorganisation. So my question is, should they be separate risks?
I'll have to go away and have a think about that because I'm happy for it to be 2 separate risks, but I'd have to discuss that with the risk holder as to whether we keep them within one risk item and separate them within that, whether we currently keep them as 2 items, but then later down the line create 2 separate ones depending on how they both move. But it's a valid point, and I'll look into it.
Thank you. Any final comments? We're asked to note the report.
I agree with what you just said, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Okay, thank you, Ryan and Alison. So item 11 now, Teresa Sharman will present the report on pages 102 to 132, and there is a recommendation on page 102 we asked to consider. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So yes, this is our internal audit plan for 25-26. So for some of you who might have seen last year's document, this is a little bit different. We've taken a different approach this year because, you know, our plan should be supporting the achievement of the council's objectives. So we've had a different approach. So the approach has been to come together with the management team and go through the red risks, the amber risks, the amber and red priorities, and consider them from a point of view of audit. And you'll see in the audit plan where things have been aligned to those corporate risks and corporate priorities. And that gets us much more in alignment with the standards, so the audit work does support that, and gets us more towards a risk-based plan. Previously, we've kind of just gone to the service areas and talked to them about do they want another audit and why that might be. And therefore, we focus very much on the operational side of the council. So this is trying to get the balance a bit more towards strategic risks and priorities. So out of the workshop session, we looked at whether the audit was essential, high, medium or low. And I think you'll find that I've said in here that the low ones probably won't get done because we've got enough time across the other areas, which are essential, high and medium, which will take, I think, most of our days or our budget that we're working towards. You'll notice that the budget I've been given this year is slightly less than last year, so we're managing with slightly less money, if you like, and therefore less days to deliver the audit plan. But the plan will give an opinion on risk governance and internal control, which is what is required of me to do for you so that you can give that opinion through to the AGS. In terms of the plan, we want it to be flexible, so we're going to have quarterly reviews. This gives us the opportunity to rethink priorities for audits, but also if risk is changing or priorities are changing, then we can bring other audits in and then reprioritise. The point being that the annual plan shouldn't be fixed, it should be flexible and dynamic, and we should be able to do work on other things if they're more important than what we have in the plan already. So that's allowing that to happen. And those changes, excuse me, will come to the committee in your progress report because you should be reviewing and agreeing those as well. The other thing just to point out is to make it clear to you that the universe's risk and audit areas, so the corporate risk, the corporate priorities are all in the universe and the service areas are all in the universe. And I show in Appendix 1 what that top level looks like. Obviously, I've not gone into all the detail and the different areas under each bit, but that gives you the picture of what the universe is that we're considering for audit work. The other part of this report is the internal audit mandate and charter. So previously, if you've been on the committee before, you'd have seen a charter, but not a mandate. So the mandate is a new requirement in the Global Internal Auditing Standards, and the mandate really is our authority to audit, which comes from the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015. So that's what the mandate kind of details for you. But the charter is all about authority, purpose and roles and responsibilities, and it covers audit committee oversight. So you've got some idea of how you come into this. It talks about my role and responsibilities. It talks about the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme, and it shows that you are approving the charter and the mandate, and we show that hopefully you'll agree it today, so we show it as being authorised. It also covers our kind of scope of work, so that's important to understand that, you know, we have access to everything and there shouldn't be any restrictions to what we can do or what we can look at. So I've tried to list as much as I can, you know, everything's in scope. Even any lacto companies like Breckland Bridge, they're all in scope for audit work. So yes, and then you've got in the final appendix, you've got the whole audit plan that we're covering in the detail. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? I've got a couple. So on the table on page 144 is sort of the summary of what's been done, what's still to be done. The two items deferred are strategic projects, Attleborough. Presumably that's because of actual timing of the actual event. And the housing needs and allocation, is that deferred because of work currently being carried out? Thank you.
the Attleborough project one, that was deferred a little while ago because of where they are with the building work and the process for appointing the contractor. And the housing need one, that is related to the transformation service review. So that is covered off in the 25-26 plan.
Thank you. And I notice you've got a substantial assurance on sustainability and climate change. That forms part of the management letter I have to sign later today, so I'm relying on your good work to inform me on that. Thank you. Right, so can I have a proposer and a seconder that members approve the internal audit plan 25-26 and the internal audit charter and mandate? I didn't see whose hand went up first, Roger, and I'll take Harry because he hasn't had a seconder. Right, so that is, right, those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. I forgot to welcome Paul Plummer, who crept in very quietly for Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for being late.
That's all right.
You have to understand, if you look at the sheet at the front, I'm not on a substitute on this committee. I was put on at Tuesday and asked to be a substitute, but I'd already got an appointment at 10 o'clock this morning, which had been...
Okay, you were on the list Alison sent me last week as being a substitute. But...
The first I knew about it was Tuesday. So I apologise for being late.
That's all right. I'm grateful for you substitutes turning up to make sure we are quorate, because I've had 2 meetings of joint committees at counties in the last month, neither of which were quorate, thanks to the non-attendance of Norwich City Council members. Thank you. That concludes item 11. Now we go on to the progress report, item 12. Sorry, I jumped forward there, didn't I? I did.
There isn't too much to say on this. I think we've got another couple of reports which are substantial assurance. We're in a good place. We've got lots of final reports now. The IT one is progressing, as it says there. It's a little bit stuck, but they have started to make contact, and so they are planning that audit. But your plan is almost finished. You are sailing through the work quite nicely now.
Good.
Obviously, the cyber security one is below the line. If anyone wanted to raise anything on that, we'd have to go offline. But yes, I mean, happy to take questions.
Does anyone want to discuss the detail on that? In which case we don't need to go below the line on that. So I presume that LGR will cause some realignment of priorities in the future audit work.
Yes, I suspect that when we meet for the first quarter review of the plan, there will be some discussion about that new risk that has appeared and whether there is any audit work that could be done, and obviously throughout the year, you know, because if we're doing the quarterly reviews, then everything gets reviewed, and if there is audit work, then it can be done. Absolutely.
I mean, it will suffer from lack of clarity from central government, I think. David.
Thanks. Just looking at the outstanding recommendations and this continual failure to meet the revised due dates on a number of these areas. So we've got waste management been revised twice. The due date was September last year. I don't know if you've got any update on that. And then I suppose what the point I'm making is, are these dates being set realistically, or are people just being too optimistic in setting a date that they then fail to meet 3-4 times?
I think with the waste one, this is on a couple of councils' list as outstanding, because I think the problem is with Kings Lynn and the agreement, so that's why that one's there. I think the proposal is to maybe remove the risk, because I think until Kings Lynn do whatever they need to do, and it's just going to sit there. And I don't think it's for lack of either of the other two councils trying to talk to them to get the agreement done. So it's possible that I'll just agree that yes, they've done. It's not like, I know they're not ignoring it, but it's come to a point when, until Kings Lynn do their bit and talk and
do
do the
you do the
agreement.
internal audit for Kings Lynn?
They're an in-house team, so I am the head of internal audit. So yes, it might be that I could try and nobble someone's ear there, nibble their ear, whatever
Just
the
say it was
phrase is,
commented upon at Breckland and what they're going to do about it.
and see if they can't do something about it. Because yes, it will sit there forever otherwise, but
Okay.
not for this council's want of.
Thank you. Any more questions, David? Oh, there's those 4 items for private sector housing. I think there is some work currently in progress on private sector housing, isn't there? No one here from housing. Alison.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the demand levels in housing on sort of every level have been really high in the last year to 18 months. So it has been difficult to get the traction in that area, hence why you see those dates changing. So I think your point is well made about, were we too ambitious with the date in the first place? And I think we probably need to reflect on that. So that's something I can take back to
I think I read somewhere there was some work being done on HMOs.
Yeah, so there's a sort of what we're calling a task force being set up to try and tackle sort of all of the different housing issues. And you mentioned earlier the sort of reorganisation that they're looking at as all part of it. So there is quite a lot of focus now to try and get these cleared off. So I'm very hopeful that once you get to May, that last day.
I mean, is that pressure audit led, or is it just the whole?
It's the whole service, the demand.
Right. Thank you. So the recommendation is, I need a proposer in a second. Well, the recommendation that we have reviewed that. So is everyone happy that we have reviewed that to your satisfaction? Yes, good, thank you. So we move then on to item 13, and Matthew, counter fraud, corruption and bribery policy, whistleblowing policy and money laundering policy. And we are the, this isn't a recommend to council, we are the authoritative body that approves these.
Chairman, if I could make a comment before the presentation. Presented with 3 quite long policies, updated policies. It would have been useful to have track changes. I spent 45 minutes trying to compare the 2022-23 version or the 24 version with the one we're being presented with today.
Right.
I've come up with about 3 different lines of difference, and that's all. And it I would have got that 45 minutes back had I had track changes, and I would have seen what was going on. Thank you.
I think I also would have the comment that a number of those policies don't have individual paragraph numbering, which would assist if anyone has to engage with any of those policies. It would assist having paragraph numbering so that complainants or whatever can be specific about which aspect of the policy they are referring to. But beyond, right, so back to you, Matthew.
Thank you. As has just really been mentioned, actually these policies have changed very little since 2022, which is probably why I didn't put the track changes on, but I do appreciate, and I'm sorry that you had to spend 45 minutes finding that out. Really, it's they've really been the only real updates have been in terms of the members of staff who people need to report any concerns to in respect of all 3 of the policies. there's been a minor change just because ARP have updated their policy, so there's a reference now in the to that change in the money laundering policy. But apart from that, there have been no changes since 2022 because legislation has not changed in the intervening period, and we think the policies fit for purpose overall. But I do take the point about numbering, and we could look at that in future.
I mean, I presume we can effectively approve these, but leave you to number the paragraphs afterwards. Mark.
This is my Linda Monument moment.
She's in Scotland.
Oh, is she? Okay. Page 189, under customer due diligence, there's a reference to euros rather than pounds.
I think if we saw a wad of euros come in here, we'd know something fishy was going on.
I think there is reference in the underpinning of legislation. It deals to refer to euros.
Right.
So when we and I know that things are bizarre, but the legislation hasn't changed. Therefore, we can't change it from euros to pounds.
Right.
But at some point, it may change, and if it does, obviously we change it.
Perhaps we better put an exchange rate in as well, so we understand. Right. So I presume, Harry, you want to?
I may be jumping the gun, as earlier on in the meeting, Chairman. Item 13. Are we yet at the stage of discussing Appendix 2? Thank you.
So I'll have to look. Appendix 2 being, sorry. Where's it gone?
I'm referring to the whistleblowing policy, Chairman.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the appendix, so I failed. I'm not a surgeon. It's a policy, but Harry mentioned Appendix 2. Page 9 of that.
Apologies, they are. They don't actually have a heading that says Appendix 1, 2 and 3, but the whistleblowing policy is Appendix 2.
Right. Does that answer your question, Harry, or do you want to mention?
You're talking about the guidance for employees, rather. Appendix. Are you talking about the guidance for employees in Appendix 2?
No, going into the policy there, standalone policy on whistleblowing. Only point I wanted to just pick up was item 2 in the policy, which is safeguards protecting the whistleblower. I declare an interest because I contributed to the legislation, the Public Interest Disclosure Act 1988, seems about 100 years ago. Third paragraph there, I'm happy with the whole policy when it says the council will, at the request of the whistleblower, keep the nature of concerns confidential. So the default is for the whistleblower to know that they can request the nature of concerns confidential. Obviously, it's self-evident that in making inquiries about anything that falls properly within the policy, they're inevitably going to be, as you allude to later on, about the person's identity or the nature of it being compromised. But it's just that bit in there that where the whistleblower has that drawn to their attention if they're making a proper raising this proper concern under the policy. So it says at the request of the whistleblower, keep the nature of concerns confidential. So it's about how that whistleblower is made aware that they can keep the nature concerns confidential. Obviously, if someone says, I don't want this to happen, go any further, etc., it's going to limit the scope of any action by, you know, by the council. Thank you.
Matthew.
I think that will be the conversation with the whistleblower to explain that if they wanted to keep it completely confidential, then the council couldn't do anything any further because our hands would be tied. But I think that will be the discussion with them in practice.
I mean, I think we've had that with standards complaints in the past where the complainant has wished to remain anonymous and therefore can't progress the complaint. So are we saying that effectively the same thing if they wish to?
Well, I think it would depend on the nature of the complaint. If the complaint is something where there's potentially breach of the law, then the council would have other duties in order to investigate.
So, all right. So the question would then be at the point of first complaint, is the future path of that complaint explained to the complainant?
Yeah, it would be at the time.
Yeah. So I think, you know, whether or not that's in the policy, if that's a practical implementation, I think there's the suitable protections there. So any other questions? So there are 3 recommendations. Can we take these on block? Right, so can I have a proposer, Mark, and a seconder, Harry? All those in favour that the counter fraud, corruption and bribery policy be approved, that the whistleblowing policy be approved, and the money laundering policy is approved. Sorry, that's my note, it's missing a bit. All in favour? Thank you. Right, so we move now on to item 14, accounting policies. Matthew, is it you or Alison?
So this is just best practice in terms of bringing the accounting policies to you and for the accounts for 24 25 and there haven't been many changes. The main change, accounting technical change in the accounts for 24 25 will be in the treatment of leases, and you'll see that when you'll see the draft accounts, the impact of that. We will be showing our leases in a different way, but I think rather than discuss that now, I think that will need to come to the
and does the policy clarify this matter about depreciation?
It does. The auditors just clarified our practice in terms of depreciation, and we have always applied depreciation in the year following the acquisition of the asset, and that's always been the practice. But we hadn't made it clear in the policy that that's what we do. But now the policy now does do that.
So something might be nearly a year old and not depreciated is the practical. Try and sell it back. Try and sell the vehicle back for what you paid for it. Okay, any questions? No questions. Can I have a proposer? Roger, have a seconder. Harry, right. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And work programme.
If you'll indulge me, before you go into the work programme, I'd like to raise a point of concern which I have. This committee has subsumed any standards committee that this organisation used to have, as it has in other places. So this is the standards committee for...
It is if a complaint gets beyond the...
However, the government started a consultation on standards committees on the 18th of December.
Right.
And it closed yesterday.
Right.
For 10 weeks. And there are 34 questions, I think, on standards committees and what should be done about them, and a range of sanctions that the standards committee that could possible sanctions that the standards committee could actually put on members who contravene the code of conduct, and some of them are quite serious. I just wondered whether this committee or any member or officer had responded to that particular consultation, which I think was quite.
I think I was sent it. I think I certainly read the. Would you have sent that, or would Sarah have sent it?
I think it may have been Sarah, but I can find out. For you if you
I
like.
can. I think I've been asked. Right, so I was sent the proposed response by Breckland, and I made further comments on it. And I presume that was sent to me and to Bill as chair and vice chair of this committee. Roger.
Can we see the response, please?
Yeah, we'll follow that up and issue it to members and substitute members. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I only asked that because I was part of a response that committee at County Council who responded to that particular thing, but it went through two committees at County.
Right.
Rather than sort of not a hidden response, but a response which was not aired in public.
Okay. Well, we will certainly get you a copy of the response. Well, I made some comments which I was told would be taken into account, but I didn't see the amended response. Yeah, so we'll have that as a follow-up, and if it's in the minutes that's to be distributed, then if there is a follow-up, we can deal with it on matters arising at the next meeting. Okay, everyone happy? So going to the work programme, page 214, I mean, I think that is mostly, that's the normal timetable of events. Yes.
I just wondered in June whether there shouldn't be the Audit Committee's annual report also going. And I don't know whether you look at the AGS. Do you receive the AGS as an audit committee? I'm just wondering also about those actions on your self-assessment and that action plan. That
the AGS will form part of the statement of accounts, so yes, that will be on there. Yeah.
Would you like to see that appear as a separate item on the agenda?
That's fine, but I think there should be Audit Committee's annual report that's pulled together.
Yes. We did one last year.
Did you do one last year? That would normally go at the same time as my annual opinion, your Audit Committee annual report, and then you do the accounts and the AGS.
I mean, I'm conscious that Bill reduced the number of meetings by one compared with 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know if there was a particular reason for that, or whether the current timetable events means we should add one back. I'm not asking for an answer now, but perhaps you'll consider that before we look at the programme next time. Yeah.
Yes, I can take that back, and I'll also speak to Democratic Services about that annual report for you to get on there, because this is quite a big agenda today, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of. I think well, we're still under 2 hours, so I'm not. Right. Anything else about the work programme? No. And the next meeting is due to be held on Thursday, the 19th of June. And we don't need to go below the line. So thank you for anyone who was listening. The meeting is now closed.